I'd like to take a step back and approach this topic from another angle. When I was a kid, my dad was a missionary. A really good one. When I was born, before I was a year old, we moved to Thailand so he could work with trafficking relief efforts for women and children in the slums of Bangkok. My first memories are outside my dad's office building, buried in the trash-covered ghettos of the Din Dang district, a housing project nestled into river klongs that were home to about 100,000 people. When I was 7, my dad relocated us to Phnom Penh, Cambodia to fill a role as a country coordinator, which basically meant being the organizational leader for every missionary in the country. Cambodia had been savaged by war and the brutal regime of the Khmer Rouge, and it was still remarkably violent and unstable. There were few paved roads, more landmines than people, and a precariously unstable government. He built the country's first Bible school and organized efforts between dozens of missionary projects and orphanages, all across a country populated by Kalashnikov-carrying teenagers. He was on a mission from God. Though this is decreasing rapidly within the church, missionaries used to survive and work through a financial system known as raising support. The old school tradition was that most Christians here in America understood that not everyone could commit their lives to missionary service, so they would pool some resources together to fund the ones who were willing to go into the world and give the good news. So missionaries would spend time in America performing a cross-country tour called itineration, in which you would go speak at a church in an attempt to drum up the finances necessary to work overseas. My dad was excellent at this. He learned to speak watching Southern Pentecostal revivalists and inner-city black preachers. He was a powerful speaker, utilizing a big, booming voice and shaking his finger towards the heavens. But his real tour de force? His testimony. My dad had 100 stories about being an orphan, a drug-dealing ski bum, a violent money launderer, and a literal Caribbean pirate, all before Jesus saved his life and sent him to work in the war-torn jungles of Indochina. I watched crowd after crowd, Sunday after Sunday, in towns across America, eat it up. Cha-ching! Don't mishear me. We were never wealthy. Dad raised enough support for us to live in a country where a bottle of Coke was a penny, and my dad was never dishonest. He wasn't lying. He was a bona fide badass. His stories were true. They were just incomplete. Behind the scenes, my parents' marriage was falling apart. My dad worked 80 to 90-hour weeks every single week, without fault. I dreaded having my dad home, which was rare, but it meant I had to tiptoe around the house for fear of stress-induced explosions of anger. My parents fought every single day. My mom was miserable. She hated Cambodia, a feeling she could never express as it would undermine the cause, and she considered leaving my dad constantly. I had virtually no relationship with my father. I do not remember time spent together, kind words of encouragement, or hugs. When we finally left Cambodia, when I was 9, my father came to the realization that he was a crippling workaholic, and he went to counseling, but he almost lost everything. My dad's unflinching loyalty to the field made him a missionary MVP, so nobody ever stopped to ask if he was taking care of his wife, his son, his friendships, his soul. Because of course he was. He was doing the Lord's work. Right? I share this long roundabout tale because I have witnessed firsthand the sort of crisis Janet is talking about. In America, and particularly in the church, we have a severe vulnerability problem, and it is ruining lives. This is a tricky issue because the church and our culture appear to praise vulnerability and will extol public speakers, teachers, and famous leaders for being so raw and transparent. We love people who will honestly share a testimony filled with pain, mistakes, ups and downs, and defeats. However, listen to the language when you hear these validations. Really pay attention to the time and place they are used. Often what we are actually loving is a false vulnerability that comes with hindsight, at being able to talk about a defeat long after the fact because we have since overcome the consequences. When people express struggles they are currently wrestling with, see if you notice a difference. Are pastors able to talk about their doubts about God? Can church leaders have crises of faith? Do young couples feel they have the space to talk about the concerns, frustrations, and worries, or do they feel they have to appear healthy and happy at all times? Perfect. Can we talk about our insecurities, our envy, and our comparison? Or will that make people think we are broken and weak? Can we talk about the addictions we continue to wrestle with? Or are we only comfortable talking about those vices we haven't touched in years? We love talking about how dirty we were, but then how can we help one another become clean? It's easy to hear a story like Janet's and think of it as being an outlier, an exception of the norm. But let's be honest, that could happen to any of us. I have a history and a continued pattern of addictive behavior and substance abuse, an on-again, off-again consumer relationship with sexuality and pornography, a crippling fear of intimacy and commitment, and a past littered with poor choices I still look over my shoulder at, hoping they won't rear-end me like a truck on the freeway. And don't think that telling you that doesn't scare the shit out of me. By the way, my dad made a remarkable recovery. We still talk about the wounds of my youth, but I am so proud of my dad for learning to express his struggles in the faith that he will be loved through them. He's learned to accept criticism and compassion. It should be noted that he doesn't put up the missionary numbers that he used to. His spiritual repair changed the way he spoke, the way he told his story, and it directly affected his budget. But it saved his marriage, renewed his relationship with his son. We all want to be loved. The most poisonous lie is that we have to be perfect to deserve it. But if we were perfect, it wouldn't be love at all. Cool. Back to Janet.